Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're getting into something pretty dense, but honestly super important. We're looking at the regulations that define what makes an online course, well, a real course in the eyes of the federal government, eligible for funding.
Exactly. We're talking about regular and substantive interaction, RSI. Three letters that really dictate a lot in distance education today.
And our mission here for you listening is to cut through that legal jargon. We're pulling from U.S. Department of Education regs, some institutional guidance, OSCQR standards.
Right. The goal is to understand the actual rules, the ones that kicked in July 1st, 2021, for designing and running online courses.
That date, July 1st, 2021, seems like a key moment.
Oh, absolutely. And we need to start with why this matters so much. I mean, the stakes are incredibly high.
Okay, high stakes how?
Well, RSI compliance is basically the legal line in the sand. It's what separates a legitimate distance education course from what the law calls a correspondence course.
Correspondence course. That sounds kind of old-fashioned, like mailing tapes back and forth. Why is that distinction so critical?
It's critical because of the money. Title IV, federal financial aid.
Ah.
Correspondence courses are flat out not eligible for federal financial aid. So if you build an online course, but it doesn't meet the RSI requirements.
The government could see it as a correspondence course.
Precisely. The DOE's Office of Inspector General can audit, reclassify it, and then demand repayment.
Repayment of all the financial aid for all the students in that course.
Yes, all of it. Associated with those non-compliant courses and students, imagine getting that bill. It could be financially devastating for an institution.
Wow, okay. That's serious. Given all the flexibility needed during the pandemic, you'd think maybe this was waived.
That's what's so telling. It wasn't. Our sources are clear. RSI rules were specifically not waived during COVID. They stayed fully in effect.
So even during the peak of emergency remote teaching?
Even then, it shows how fundamental the government considers this. They see RSI as the guarantee that taxpayer money is funding actual instruction, guided learning, not just access to materials.
Okay, that definitely puts a different spin on it. It's not just bureaucracy.
Not at all.
So let's define our terms then. How does the Department of Education legally define distance education?
Okay, so the definition is basically instruction using technology, internet, audio conferencing, whatever, where students and the instructor are physically separated.
Standard definition so far.
Right, but here's the key part. The technology must support regular and substantive interaction between students and the instructor. That interaction can be live, synchronous or asynchronous, like discussion boards.
And the instructor? Does it matter who that person is? Could it be a TA?
That's a really important point for compliance. The instructor has to be someone responsible for delivering the content and meet the qualifications set by the institution's accrediting agency.
So if interaction is mostly handled by someone who doesn't meet those accreditor qualifications,
then you risk failing a core part of RSI, specifically Element 4. We'll get to the elements in a bit.
Got it. Before these 2021 rules, online learning sometimes felt, well, a bit hands-off, like the instructor was just there if you reached out. What changed?
That's exactly the shift. The old language was looser, allowing interaction that was maybe only initiated by the instructor or even just mostly instructor-initiated, kind of passive.
Okay.
The new rules, post-July 2021, demand an explicit, proactive focus. The interaction must be both regular and de-substantive. It's no longer enough to just be available. The instructor needs to be actively driving the engagement.
That feels like a huge shift in expectation for faculty, from available to driving.
It really was. And interestingly, while it's a regulatory requirement,
it's also just good teaching. Right.
Exactly. This is where the legal stuff and good pedagogy completely align. Research is very clear. RSI boosts student success, retention, helps them advance, helps them actually finish the course.
So the rules are essentially forcing institutions to adopt practices that research already showed were effective for online learning.
Pretty much, yeah. It combats that feeling of isolation students can get online and ensures they're actually being guided by an expert.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So let's get into the weeds. You mentioned elements. Our sources point to 4 core elements RSI needs to meet. What are they?
Right. Think of these as the 4 pillars of compliance. Every distance ed course needs interaction, that is. 1, instructor initiated.
Okay.
2, regular and scheduled. 3, substantive, meaning academic. And 4, delivered by a qualified instructor. Miss 1 and you're potentially non-compliant.
Let's take number 1, instructor initiated. Why is this such a big deal?
Because it flips the script from passive availability. I mean, the instructor starts the interaction, They guide the learning through planned activities, feedback, discussions.
So just putting office hours in the syllabus and saying, come if you need help, isn't enough.
Definitely not. That's reactive. Instructor-initiated means proactive. The instructor has to be the one reaching out, setting up the learning moments, guiding the flow.
Okay, which leads directly into number 2. Regular and scheduled. This sounds like it's about consistency.
It is. You can't just have a flurry of activity in week 1 and then radio silence. Regular means it has to be predictable and scheduled throughout the course.
Predictable and scheduled. How predictable?
Well, the frequency should match the course length and the amount of content. Think of it like regular check-ins. It need to be built into the course structure, into the syllabus.
And it's the institution's job to monitor this.
Yes, the institution needs to monitor student engagement and ensure the instructor proactively engages, either based on that monitoring, like if a student seems to be falling behind, or if the student asks for help. But the key is that proactive, scheduled element.
Got it. Element 3, substantive. This sounds like the what of the interaction. What makes it substantive versus not?
This trips people up sometimes, but it's actually pretty clear in the regs. Substantive means it has to be academic in nature. It has to relate directly to teaching and learning the course content or assessing that learning.
So an email reminding students about a deadline, that's not substantive.
Correct. That's procedural or organizational. Important, maybe, but it doesn't count towards your RSI compliance. Same with like instructions on how to use the LMS or where to find tech support.
But answering a question about, say, the interpretation of a specific theory in the reading.
That is substantive. It's academic. It's about the course content. It's furthering their understanding. That's the test. Is it about the learning itself?
Academic versus procedural. Okay. And element 4, qualified instructor, we touched on this.
We did, but it's worth stressing. The person initiating and conducting this regular, substantive interaction must meet the accreditor's qualifications for teaching that course. If it's primarily a TA who isn't qualified as the instructor of record per the accreditor, those interactions might not count.
Right. It protects the academic integrity aspect.
Exactly. Ensures the person guiding the learning is actually qualified to do so.
Okay, we have the 4 pillars. Instructor-initiated, regular and scheduled, substantive, and qualified instructor. Let's dive deeper into substantive. What kind of activities actually count? Faculty need concrete examples here.
Yeah, absolutely. The regulations actually provide a list. And the rule is that the course has to engage students in teaching, learning, and assessment, using at least 2 of these types of activities regularly.
At least 2 different types happening regularly. Okay, what's on the list?
First, providing direct instruction. This could be live online lectures, recorded lectures perhaps with a required follow-up Q&A, or even short videos explaining tricky concepts.
Okay, direct instruction. Makes sense. What's second?
Second, assessing or providing feedback on student coursework. And this is key. The feedback needs to be substantive itself.
Meaning more than just a grade.
Oh, definitely. Just putting a score on something usually isn't enough. The feedback needs to be meaningful, aimed at helping the student understand and improve. It needs to engage them with the content or skills.
Can you give an example of feedback that counts versus feedback that might not?
Sure. So on an essay, just writing good job or needs work, probably not substantive. But feedback like, your argument here effectively uses the primary source, but consider how theory X complicates your conclusion review pages 50-55 and revise this section. That's specific, academic, and pushes learning.
Right. It points back to the content and requires action. Very clear. What are the other activities on the list?
Third is providing information or responding to questions about the course content. Again, the emphasis is on content, not logistics.
Okay.
Fourth is facilitating a group discussion about the course content.
Group discussions. Lots of online courses use those. What makes a discussion board substantive for RSI?
It can't just be fluff. A post your introduction and favorite hobby thread, that's an icebreaker, not substantive interaction. A substantive discussion needs to dig into the course material. So instead of, what did you think of the reading? Maybe it's analyze the author's main argument in Chapter 3 using evidence from the text and critique one potential weakness. And crucially, the instructor needs to be in that discussion, guiding it, asking probing questions, synthesizing points, not just setting it up and walking away.
So the instructor facilitates, doesn't just observe.
Precisely. Active facilitation. And the fifth one is a bit of a catch-all. Other instructional activities approved by the institution's accrediting agency. But usually courses rely on those first 4.
Okay, so direct instruction, feedback, answering content questions, facilitating content discussions, at least 2 of those regularly, initiated by a qualified instructor.
You got it. That's the core of ensuring substantive interaction. It demands rigor.
Now, let's connect this to the very start of a course, that audit fear you mentioned. How does RSI play out in those critical first few days? Online students can feel adrift initially.
They can, and that's exactly why the rules are so specific about initial contact. Compliance literally starts before day 1 with something called the Welcome Announcement Protocol.
A welcome email. What's so special about it?
It's required. For one, faculty must send it via email to everyone enrolled and waitlisted. And the timing is incredibly specific.
How specific?
You can't send it too early, no earlier than 5 business days before the course starts.
Yeah.
Don't want it lost in the inbox. But you absolutely must send it no later than 11:55 p.m. the night before the first day of instruction.
11:55 p.m. the night before. That's a sharp deadline. Why so precise?
It ensures the information is timely, relevant, and it acts as proof the instructor is present and ready for the term. It prevents using stale automated messages sent way in advance.
Okay, and what needs to be in that email?
Keep the tone relatively informal, build some rapport, but include the essentials: course name, dates, instructor contact info, the delivery mode, fully online, hybrid, etc. Clear instructions for logging into the LMS, which you mentioned is called Lamakuto at your institution.
Right.
And, critically, it must describe the first week's activities, including the all-important check-in assignment.
Ah, the check-in assignment. This sounds like where the Title IV compliance really bites.
This is the big one for financial aid documentation. It's non-negotiable. Here's the massive rule change everyone needs to understand. Simply logging into the course, clicking into Lamaku, does not count as student participation or academic engagement for Title IV purposes anymore.
Wait, really? Just logging in proves nothing?
Nothing to an auditor. It used to, years ago, but not anymore since that July 2021 change. You need documented proof the student actually did something academic.
Wow. Okay, so if logging in isn't enough, what do institutions need to show?
They need evidence of actual academic engagement. That's why every distance head course must have a check-in activity assigned by midnight on the first day. And it needs to be due pretty quickly, definitely within the first week.
You mentioned maybe even earlier, like day 3.
Yeah, an earlier deadline, like day 3, is often recommended. It gives the instructor time to see who hasn't done it and reach out, try to intervene before it's too late.
And if the student doesn't complete that assignment by the deadline, what happens then?
Then the process kicks in. The student has to be reported as no-show. Your guidance mentioned using an early alert system, like eAlapono, for this.
Okay.
That no-show report leads to the student being dropped, involuntarily withdrawn from the course. And the institution is then legally required to return any Title IV financial aid dispersed for that student immediately.
So that first, seemingly small assignment has huge financial implications for both the student and the institution.
Absolutely massive. It might be low stakes grading-wise, but it's high stakes compliance-wise.
What's a good example then? It needs to be academic, right? Not just clicking, I agree.
Correct. It needs substance. A great example is a syllabus quiz. Not just true-false, but maybe questions that require finding specific policy information or reflecting on the course structure. It's assessment, it engages them with course rules, it's documentable.
And it serves as that first academic interaction.
Exactly. Or another good one is a short discussion post. Maybe they have to post confirming they've read the academic integrity policy and briefly discuss which course topic they're most interested in exploring and why. That requires reading, reflection, writing, clearly academic.
And the instructor can then reply, maybe comment on their topic choice,
Yeah,
starting that RSI loop immediately.
precisely. You establish contact, confirm engagement, and start the academic conversation, all while meeting that critical Title IV requirement.
This has been incredibly clarifying. It really connects the dots between these dense regulations and, well, just effective online teaching. Let's try to sum this up.
Okay, so RSI, regular and substantive interaction, it's fundamentally the legal requirement that allows a course to be classified as distance education, making it eligible for federal financial aid.
It's the compliance bridge, keeping the Title IV funds flowing.
Right. But as we've seen, it's much more than just a hoop to jump through. This specific requirements interaction initiated by a qualified instructor, happening regularly, being academic in nature, they push distance learning away from being a passive, isolated experience.
Towards something more structured, more interactive, more like actual guided learning.
Exactly. It essentially mandates intentional, high-quality course design based on practices we already know work well for student success online.
So thinking about this for you, our listener, We've unpacked these RSI rules. They're strict, they're specific, they carry huge financial weight, and yet,
And yet, almost everything the regulations demand—proactive instructor engagement, meaningful feedback, discussions focused on content aligns perfectly with established best practices for effective online teaching.
which leaves us with a final thought to chew on. Were these detailed RSI regulations created only to safeguard federal dollars? Or did the Department of Education, maybe intentionally, maybe accidentally, end up writing a mandate for better online education across the board?
It certainly seems like in this case, the drive for compliance ended up reinforcing, even requiring, good pedagogy. A pretty powerful connection to consider as you design or teach your next online course.
Definitely something to think about. Thanks for breaking that all down. We'll catch you next time on The Deep Dive.